Uncertain times. Lately, these words have become all too common. It's a soft way of saying no one knows when this will all end or how bad it will get. But some things are certain. People are losing their jobs, but not their debts. At Bromwich & Smith, a licensed insolvency trustee, we want to offer a different kind of certainty. Government-legislated debt forgiveness. To learn about consumer proposals, a flexible, federally protected alternative to bankruptcy, visit certaintimes.ca.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are listening. Welcome to the Hockey Podcast. My name is Kevin Olenek. You can follow me, of course, on Twitter at KEVOLE, podcast_hockey on Twitter. All social media channels, you can follow me, KEVOLE, including TikTok, which I've done one. I will do more one day. And then you can subscribe on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We had a brief conversation about hair before we were going on air here. That I didn't even realize that rhymed. Tyler, your hair you're not happy with your hair.
Well, I never really am in the first place, but it's longer than it's ever been. Obviously, with the COVID pandemic, it's been difficult to get a haircut from anybody. That's good. So I'm attempting to grow it out, and it's a challenge so far. So I'm wearing the hat today. I'm trying to get the flow to establish, but it's challenging after decades of not having my hair like that.
Sean, Heidi, how is your hair?
Well, luckily I keep mine pretty short, so it's easy for me to do the majority of it with just clippers and then rely on Heidi to get the parts that I can't see. So yeah, it's been all right. I've been one of the better looking in terms of hair than a lot of people during this quarantine.
Yeah. And my hair, I was due to get my hair trimmed up and get dyed again in April. So now it's to the point where my roots have grown out too much. My hair feels like it's too long. It's getting annoying. I'm also just getting far too lazy to actually do it. So I'm starting to get annoyed with mine too. I will be happy when I can actually get back to getting my hair actually done.
Fair, yes. Devin, your hair, it's growing out, I see.
Yes, for those of you who don't know me, I'm balding. So I guess the proper term is receding.
Since you were a teenager.
Yeah, pretty much. Since I was about 16, it started receding, which has been great. I'm now 29, and it has not stopped. So it's not very lush on top, but on the sides, you can definitely see the cul-de-sac growing. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to grow it out until I have to go back to work and see what I still have.
Cool. Chris, how is your hair?
Mine is manageable, but it's definitely the longest it's been in a while. I haven't had it cut in months. Other than Hannah has actually done a trim on the sides, but we haven't touched the top.
And Hannah's joining us as well. And your hair?
I need a haircut badly. My dead ends. I need to get rid of these dead ends because if I'm trying to grow my hair for the wedding and I've got split ends, they need to be gone because that just means no growth.
Fair, yes. My hair, I always wear a hat, but I think I'm going to have to do the shave thing, probably just in case we may have no barbers for a while. I may just shave my head, but I don't know. And then Bowie is in the background saying hello, and I'm sure Gord is there as well, and I'm sure they're all doing fine. Gord the dog. So, just so you know, we're going to do 2 or 3 different podcasts. And I'm going to send out a full, complete podcast. But we're going to try something a little bit different that you can split and listen to different topics as they go on as well. So you'll have the option to do that. And our first topic, it's been an emotional week on hockey in hockey circles. As 55 images of a private message was screen captured, which included the University of North Dakota's forward Jackson Keane, Florida Panthers prospect Jack Rodewald, Jeremy Leipsic of the University of Manitoba, and, of course, Washington Capitals forward Brendan Leipsic. Jeremy was cut from the University of Manitoba. Brendan has been waived with the purposes of terminating his contract. All 4 of the players have been banned from several restaurants in the Winnipeg area. The Florida Panthers have said that this has no place in our organization, and the University of North Dakota has just announced that they are going to handle these chats internally. It brought up a firestorm of debate again on Twitter with words of culture, toxic, hockey, misogyny. And we have decided as a group, we've decided that instead of me moderating this conversation, Hannah is going to lead us into this conversation because, I think that this is a better decision. I think we need to hear. I think we all agree that this is one that I think a female voice needs to lead us in this conversation. So I am now going to turn this conversation over to Hannah.
All right. So, as I said, this is a little bit of a heavier topic. So, for those who are not aware, Leipsic and the 3 others in the conversation that was screen captured and then shared all over the internet, there were a lot of very unsavory comments that were made. There were a number of misogynistic comments about one player's wife and her body just after having a baby. There were comments about going out and sleeping with a bunch of other women. There were comments about fellow teammates and other NHL players and just being incredibly rude towards them. And a lot of people are understandably upset about the things that were said in that conversation. So essentially, Brendan Leipsic was put on waivers, as we all know. And to start off, do we think that consequence is sufficient for essentially the crime? So I'm going to pass it off to Tyler.
Well, there is a consequence, I think, when you get cut. Essentially, they're terminating him, so he's lost his job security. And Brendan is, never been a star player, so he's already bounced around between a bunch of teams. So from his perspective, I mean, it's just really stupid, just really reckless. I guess a bit clueless too about where he fits in the world of hockey. Like, is he that, he's that confident to just kind of run his mouth like that, not think he's going to get caught, and then not lose his spot in the league over that? That's really poor judgment there. Is he done in the NHL forever? Well, that's hard to say, down the road as teams get desperate for NHL caliber players with injuries and stuff. We've seen this, like in baseball, for example. The Blue Jays wanted to move on from Roberto Osuna because he had some domestic issues, and then another team took a chance on him. So I could see how there'd be the point of view that it's not really a consequence, but at the same time, he is being cut now by a team that he was established on, and because he's not that strong a player really, and not only did he make some really misogynistic comments about women, but he was also bad-mouthing old teammates too. So there's a lot of reasons why teams wouldn't take a chance on this, and it's hard to blame them for that.
Heidi, let's go over to you.
Oh, you guys are muted.
Still on mute.
Technical difficulties.
Oh.
All right, maybe we'll jump over to Devin instead.
Devin is also muted.
This is just working out swell.
Sorry,
Can
guys.
you hear us now?
Oh, yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay, so back to Heidi then.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you actually repeat the question?
So essentially, my question was, is his consequence essentially sufficient or suitable for the crime, so to speak?
Yes and no. Like, the fact that he was, and as we were saying off air, has he really been punished by the Capitals? I guess he's put on waivers, but until his contract is actually terminated, some team could still go pick him up and pay him. He hasn't been. There was I realize obviously that we don't have the game going on right now, so throwing a suspension or something like that doesn't seem like really any kind of punishment or even a fine, but it's really I'm really struggling to make a decision on whether it is sufficient enough. I think for just the situation right at this very second, with the fact that there's just such a mess going on in the NHL with everything else going on and how all these things would work. I think it was the best thing that they could do was to put him on waivers for the termination of his contract. I think there might need to be a step after that. I'm not 100% sure what that necessarily should be, but I would like to maybe hear a statement from the Players Association kind of regarding this as well.
Yes. In terms of the unconditional waivers, what I understand is waiver process takes 24 hours. I don't know what that means right now for pause, but it takes 24 hours. They waived 2 days ago. No one claimed him. He's out. I don't see anyone wanting to bring him in to the locker room. He basically burned all the bridges he has. All four of those players did. So don't see. There may not be a quote unquote official punishment at this point. I think there should be. I think they need to start taking a stand and start making things a lot more public with this, like they did after everything came out of Peters and Mike Babcock. They need to start making a public stance on this to make sure that everyone knows that this isn't anything that is acceptable that's in any regards within the game.
Sean, your microphone was cutting out a little bit there.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
better.
So, what did you guys miss?
I think I got a bit. I think you said you talked about Babcock and Peters. You talked about the Players Association, and you talked about unconditional waivers. But you were just I got some of it, but I didn't get everything. From my end, I don't know if everyone else did, but
Yeah, I was kind of cutting in and out.
All right, am I sounding good now?
yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So, like I said, with the waiver process, it's 24 hours. I don't know if that changes with the pause, but I don't think it does. So he's cut and gone and off the Washington Capitals roster. In terms of, yes, there isn't an official punishment. I think there should be. I think it's time that the NHL and the NHLPA, I think there needs to be a distinction on that, need to stand up and make it known that this is not anything that anyone should have to deal with within the game. And I do think that both need to stand up and do something different to handle this.
So moving on to the next question.
Oh, did you?
been, say, for example.
Hannah, did you want anyone else to comment, or just because Devin?
I'm just going to kind of like pick a couple of people per little point, just because there's a number of talking points.
Okay.
Just to kind of try to keep this from going forever. So say that this had happened to a much bigger player. For example, Sidney Crosby, Alexander Ovechkin, Nathan McKinnon, any of those bigger, more leadership type names in the game. Would the consequence have been the same? Or what do we think would have been different had it been one of these guys? And let's go to Devin.
Yeah, I think they would have done it a bit differently. I don't think they would have been put on waivers. They just have too much talent, and then they're too important to the NHL and to their respective teams. So I don't think that they would have just been cut and that would have been the end of it. I think that there would have been a suspension. There would have been a more heartfelt apology. And they're just too important of players to the NHL and their respective teams. So I don't think that I don't think anything would have been very similar to what Leipsic and the other players have gone through.
Yep. Kevin?
No, I agree with Devin. And there's an article from Mike McIntyre in the Winnipeg Free Press that brought up a very interesting point. And he's not defending Brendan Leipsic, but he brings up that Bobby Hull, as an example, in Winnipeg, has his number retired and was part of the all TSN Winnipeg Jets team. And he does not have a very good reputation of actions. This year, what already mentioned has been Mike Babcock and Bill Peters. Let's not forget Austin Matthews and what happened there, and how that was a play-by-play guy said that was just a little bit of a problem. And there hasn't really been a question following Austin Matthews since the start of the season. It's been a lot of talk about hockey, but no one has really brought up Austin Matthews' previous transgressions. So, no, I don't think... I agree with Devin. If this was a main star player, he certainly wouldn't have his contract terminated, and a lot of this would have been. I think if this was a star player, there would have been some organizations that would try to put this into a PR campaign of a redemption story and not get to the real issue.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. Moving on to the next question. With all of this happening, do we think that this is enough to make a change in sports culture? Because as many people have complained over the years, sports culture can be quite toxic with things like this happening. So is this particular instance, is this enough to make a change in this culture, or do we think that this is just going to make athletes more careful about keeping things under wraps? Tyler?
I think it's for a short period of time will create this heightened awareness with athletes, and they would conduct themselves more carefully. But do I think it's going to really change things? No, I think it's going to take a star player losing their career over it before people really take it seriously. To the point of the last question there, I was thinking too, like if this was a star player such as a Crosby or a McKinnon or Ovechkin, I think it would go the way that it did with Austin Matthews. I think there would be more willingness for an organization to manage the situation as opposed to cutting ties like we've seen here with Brendan Leipsic. So, yeah, I don't know. You'd like to think that this would alter behavior, but I don't think so. I think there's been enough incidents now of social media misconduct becoming public and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. These seem to be happening with about the same sort of regular frequency. It seems like every few months there's something that comes up that professional athletes, known namers are involved in.
Yeah.
And just to add on to Tyler's point, actually, like domestic disturbance sort of issues in the NFL, like they've still happened at the same clip regardless of the punishment.
Yeah.
So yeah, as far as whether this is going to have any significant impact, sadly, I'm doubtful.
Yeah. And another thing that I feel like, when all of these things come out, like there's always this big backlash on social media from fans of the sport, or even people who don't necessarily watch the sport or the team that such incidents came from. And there's always a big uproar about it, but that never really goes anywhere. Like you might see the statements from the heads of the leagues or whatever saying, we don't stand for this kind of behavior, this kind of comments. But you very rarely find that it goes beyond that. And that's troubling to me.
Yeah, and that's why I mentioned before that it's time for the NHL and the NHLPA to step up and start making examples of these players, and as well as all the other leagues. I do think that we have made progress, but this is a systematic change, and you're trying to change the behaviors of hundreds, thousands upon players coming up through the ranks. I think that there's a lot of changes that have been made, and I think the next generation is going to be miles better at this than this current generation. This current generation has been stuck in the old school sports culture mentality, as I would like to call it. Going back to like Bobby Hall and all these older players, where back 20, 30, 40 years ago, stuff like that was said and it was overlooked and accepted, and people weren't calling it out for what it is, which is being a horrible person. And I think overall, in terms of hockey specifically and other sports, we are making progress. It's not at the pace that a lot of people are wanting, and it's not at the pace that we would really like it to be. But I just have a hard time realistically seeing how we can speed it up without the help of both the leagues and the player associations stepping up and really coming down hard on perpetrators who do cross the line and
cutting it.
This
cutting out again. You're cutting out again.
I don't know what I'm putting up. I'm not touching anything. So
no,
what I'm saying is it's time for the NHL and the NHLPA to really step up and take leadership here, and like they did after the Babcock and Peters deals, where they Hockey Night in Canada had that one night where they talked about everything, and they basically created a much more visual awareness of what the issue is.
I think that part of this too, and I'm not a guy that's going to bring in media conspiracy, but I think that this has been an opportunity missed by the NHL media as well, in a time that we don't have any games, and in a time that we've had, let's face it, we've had the Babcock, we had Peters, we had Matthews, we had Don Cherry this year. There is an opportunity for the NHL and the NHL media to dig into these issues a little bit more. I know that this isn't the sexiest topic to talk about, but I think that the NHL media needs to bring this forward as a topic to talk about. I mean, it's great to bring up and we do it. We're doing we're reviewing drafts, and there's all these teams, and who would you rather be in a quarantine with, and there's all these fun things, and I get it to try to, but there's been an opportunity to have a serious conversation about this now, and it's very rare that this conversation is actually happening. It's taking an incident like this to bring this forward, as opposed to maybe being proactive about it and talking about these issues in a constructive way. And I know it's because it's not going to get a lot of ratings, but I do think that there's an opportunity here that I think that the NHL media is missing out on.
That's a very fair point, Kevin. So moving on to the next topic. A lot of people, some people who have been defending Brendan Leipsic, and some people who haven't necessarily been defending him, but have maybe been trying to come in from a neutral perspective. A lot of comments that come from that side of things discuss the whole idea of invasion of privacy when these screenshots were leaked. And I feel like maybe there's kind of a difference between, people in the spotlight, celebrities, athletes, that sort of thing, versus everyday sort of people. I feel like as somebody in the spotlight, part of your job is to uphold an image that is acceptable to the public, and to the standards of who your employer is. Whereas everyday sort of layman's people, you're a nobody. So it's not going to get that much traction if something comes out, typically. So essentially the question is, should these people in the spotlight consider that anything that they say in a private conversation, whether it's text message, over social media, anything like that, should that they consider that anything they say be at risk of being leaked?
I would say absolutely. I think any of us really should actually be thinking that, with the ability to screenshot stuff. How many times have we seen on Twitter from quote unquote regular people of people screenshotting the DMs that somebody sent them and sharing them all over Twitter? Like, I think if you're going to say, like, nothing is private anymore. And so I don't think it even matters anymore as to, like, what your so-called status is. Like, you just need to be a better person. And, like, yes, of course, like, it was an invasion of privacy, because you have an assumption of privacy, right? When you have, like, your whatever, your direct messages, it's not supposed to be out in the public, but you can't just, like, if you just have your head buried in the sand and think that, oh yeah, like nobody's reading this, like, that's just on you. So I think that you just can't assume that anymore. And just kind of like your question about, like, being able to kind of, like, everybody should, like, feel like they are being watched, and, like, you do got to be careful about the things that you're saying. Like, I feel that even I've been seeing incidents where, like, frontline workers, including, like, nurses and stuff like that, are saying stuff about how the pandemic is being taken way too seriously, and it isn't that bad and stuff, and they're saying these things on their Facebook, and that's not and they're expecting to not get any consequence from it. So I think we just need to realize that, like, we just can't expect that privacy anymore. So maybe don't say stupid shit anyways.
Yeah, essentially, if you would not say something in a microphone to a group of people standing in front of you, you probably shouldn't say it, period.
Well, the other thing with this too is, okay, yeah, this was a private conversation, fine, and I thought about that too, full disclosure, but nobody in this conversation said, hey, we shouldn't be talking about this. Hey, this needs to kind of stop. I think we're taking this a little too far. Like, there's like, if you're going to defend the private conversation part, if this is your biggest issue, then I'm sorry, nobody in this private conversation said anything to stop this. So I don't think that it's really valid. Now, if this was something to the point of, you know what, of revealing something personal, like something personal that no one really needed to know, in terms of like a personal life choice, i.e. like, or a sickness or anything like that could affect someone's, something that's really none of our business, then the privacy part is a valid conversation. But it's not in a case like this. I'm not going to buy into the privacy conversation because it's not valid. It shouldn't. The problem is this shouldn't have happened in the first place. Am I making sense?
Yeah. For me, they're two completely separate topics. You have one privacy issue and one you're just not a good person issue. You have to act as if anything you say online can be put out to the public. I think if there's one thing that you can look at as a positive out of this is if everyone can actually look at that way. Anything you put in writing online, whether it's even just a group conversation in public Twitter or a group conversation in private DMs, if you're not willing to say that out in public, then you shouldn't be saying it.
I think that's a pretty good way to end that particular question. As making this a little bit more wholesome, as Thumper from Bambi would say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. All right, so moving on to the next talking point here. There has been a lack of statements by other players condemning what was said in this conversation. So why have we not heard from anyone? And is there anybody in particular that each of us are disappointed in for not speaking up? Let's go to Devin.
I think we haven't heard anything from any players because the NHL hasn't said anything. And that I think they're waiting for, a statement to come out that is applicable to them from the NHL, and they haven't heard it. I'm disappointed in the players that were involved. Not saying exactly that it was wrong or not I guess, it comes down to whether or not people are good people or not. These players are there because they're the best of what they do. And they're here to entertain us, quote unquote. Some of them aren't good people. And that's just the reality of it. And I think the people who haven't said anything or haven't made a statement, it kind of shows what type of people they are. It's also the potential that their clubs are saying, or the NHL has come out to them and said, don't say anything as of yet, stand pat, and, wait for our cue. There's multiple levels to that kind of aspect, but I think overall it's the potential that, these players aren't good people, and that's the reality of it, which is kind of unfortunate, but it might be the truth.
Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that a lot of players haven't spoken up just because they're the type that don't want to draw too much attention to themselves, not necessarily because they have something to hide, but just because they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to cause undue attention to their team or anything like along those lines. So I think that's probably the main reason why we haven't seen players speak up. I don't think like there's a particular player I'm disappointed in that regard, but obviously you would wish there might be a little bit more backlash coming from within the hockey community as opposed to just this sort of public sort of backlash from social media.
And going with that too, and kind of going back to what Devin had said, there's a very strong possibility that a number of people in the NHL are just not good people. And so there's probably a number of guys who are going through their own private conversations and trying to erase any trace of things that they don't want getting out. Because, God forbid that they come out and make a statement to look good PR-wise, and then somebody's like, well, hold up, wait a minute. This person's a hypocrite, and I've got proof of it, and then go and share on the internet. So I think that that's probably a big factor as to why no players are really willing to step up and say anything about it.
There is someone go ahead. Sorry,
I feel like, at the very least, I feel like the team, like the teams themselves have kind of a responsibility to say like, yeah, no, this is not acceptable from our players. Like, we expect better kind of thing. Just like some sort of blanket statement, at least from each of the teams themselves. Maybe not individuals, but just kind of get that sort of support built up for the fact that this is not acceptable behavior from players.
What I was going to say, I think the thing that is maybe, I understand, I think that this is, I want to say that there's some complexity into what people would say necessarily on Twitter in regards to direct messages and those types of things. But there were things said about hockey players that had, like a Garnet Hathaway, a Jake Virtanen, a number of these guys that at the very least you would think teammates would come forward and defend them. So I think that that's maybe, while I understand the complexity to it, I'm a little bit disappointed that not past current and former teammates of some of these players are not coming out and defending some of these players that were mentioned in here. I don't see that being difficult. And I think the biggest disappointment is, and I'm going to back something that Sean said here, I think the NHL, specifically the NHLPA, has been deathly silent on this. It's not so much that the teams that need to say, I'm sure the teams need to say stuff, but the NHL Players Association needs to start taking this from their end very seriously. It's not only the NHL, it is the NHLPA that I think has to start speaking out a little bit more. And this includes alumni. Like, we should not be hearing only from Brett Hull. I would like to hear from a Wayne Gretzky. Why is Wayne Gretzky not saying anything here? Like, I don't know. They're from the NHLPA and alumni, to me, is probably, in my mind, the biggest disappointment here.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. And kind of using that as a transition here, you mentioned Brett Hull. So, as I'm sure everybody here is aware, Brett Hull came out the other day and made a comment on all of this, and he had a bit of an unsavory response to what had happened, and he essentially said that he thinks that we're ruining the fun of hockey because the screenshots were leaked and people were being upset about what happened in the chat. And his reasoning for that was, well, back in his day, all of these things were said. It was locker room talk, yada, yada, yada. But because it wasn't in writing, that made it hearsay, and that made it okay and acceptable. And so with that being said, I'm sure we all remember a few months back, Jess Allen, the Canadian TV show host, had made comments about, Canadian hockey culture being toxic and being for essentially white boys and all of that sort of thing. And she had a huge backlash.
I have the clip if you want to hear it.
Yeah, that would be great, actually.
I don't worship at the altar of hockey, because there's a certain type of person in my mind, in my experience, who does. And they all tended to be white boys who weren't, let's say, very nice. They were not generally thoughtful. They were often bullies. Their parents weren't able to afford to put them, spend $5,000 a year on minor hockey. And for me, Don Cherry is the walking and talking representative of that type.
So yeah, everybody remembers that, I'm sure. And a lot of people remember she was lambasted on social media. There was a huge backlash for her comments. A number of people were in support of her comments who have experienced, the things that she's talked about, but there were a lot of people who were coming out in defense of Don Cherry and saying, that's not what this entire sport is about, and you shouldn't be generalizing and that sort of thing. So with everything that's been coming out since her comments, has anybody's views on what she said changed? Are we seeing that maybe her views are a little bit more valid than maybe we originally felt?
No. I mean, I think her perspective there is reasonable enough. That's probably what she experienced. But still, I mean, there's a lot of people that play hockey that aren't like that. She didn't really back it up with any kind of real research. It was more of an anecdotal take, and that's what people didn't like about it, because there's lots of parents out there that are probably quite proud of raising good kids and good hockey players that don't do this kind of stuff. So that's where she ran into some problems. I don't think it's wrong per se that she made that observation in her circles, but she Don Cherry gets into trouble generalizing, and that's what Jess Allen did there as well.
I'm in sort of in the same camp as Tyler there. But just re-listening to that, and it got my hackles up again. It was how she said it. It was how she basically made it sound like every hockey boy was a bad person. That's just the way it came across to me, and I think that's the way it came across to many other people. And that was one of the major issues. I think to say that there is a problem in hockey culture, there is a subset of people in hockey culture that are creating a toxic environment, that is a very fair comment to make. But to say that every person, and that's how that comment came across to me, is a problem. That's where she got into trouble. As I said, and as Tyler said, her anecdotal and experience is not taken away by me saying that, and is very valid for her to explain that was her experience. But the way, again, it's just we talk about how we need to word things correctly and not and so that it doesn't come back to you the way that did to her. That's where she got into trouble.
So I'm going to push back. And so we hear stories of Mark Giordano as an example, giving $450 or paying somebody's Walmart bill, and we hear a lot of the Sedins doing this, and we hear a lot about a number of different hockey players doing a number of different things, and that is great, and that's awesome. But that doesn't dismiss the fact that there is a problem. And, I'll use me as an example. I can be a really nice guy, but that doesn't mean that I'm perfect. That doesn't mean that I don't make mistakes on a number of different occasions, and that I don't need to make any changes to be a better person. I think that that's what the heart of what Jess Allen is trying to say, there is good things. I mean, absolutely, there's a lot of wonderful things that hockey can do, but that I think that the problem is in Canada, maybe, and this is why I think that this is more hockey, partly hockey, more sports, is as Canadians, we don't want to feel like we are that bad. But the fact of the matter is we do have some issues that we need to look at. And there seems to be a fear in doing that. So I don't necessarily, I understand what Tyler and Sean are saying about the message may have been off, but I don't necessarily think that this means that there's no issues either. And I don't necessarily think that it's necessarily a small group of people. I think it's something that we do need to systemically work on.
Yeah, I agree. And I just feel that since her whole comment had come out, we've had all of these particular instances showing up where, conversations are leaked and really awful things that were said are made public. And, Austin Matthews incident and Bill Peters and all of that sort of thing. That all just goes back and reinforces a lot of what she said about how there's issues with toxicity in hockey and, let's face it, sports culture in general. So I think, for me personally, while yes, I completely understand and where Tyler and Sean are coming from in the sense that, yes, it's overgeneralized statement and it kind of came across as a blanket statement. But I think these particular incidences are still giving her initial statement strength.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I just think if you're a parent that has done a good job of raising a boy or a girl that's in sports and they don't have these problems, then that's gonna you're gonna be rankled by hearing something that sounds like a blanket statement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel that she had a reason for saying what she said, and her feelings were totally valid. But as Tyler just said, I think it's okay for people to not be happy with what she said either, because as I said, people who are not like that, who fall under this umbrella of what she literally said, white man, and who are not have never exhibited any sort of toxic behavior, and as you said, the parents who are raising these kids, and I don't know, I'd be interested to hear what maybe say Devin would have to say about hearing something like that as a white dude who grew up playing hockey.
Yeah, I understand what she's trying to get at. The way that it was to kind of, piggyback on what Sean was saying. It's just the way that she said it. It's the way that it's just the way that she said it, period. It's not right. It's very, a prejudice way to say things. Not saying that there isn't issues, because I definitely have seen firsthand issues within hockey in general, because that's what I mainly played growing up. I personally didn't have any liking to it. But it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. It's just the way that she came about saying it, because then that's just generalizing all hockey players as being bad people. I think you can generalize it to sports, and I think you can generalize it to humanity in general. You're gonna have good and bad people. You're gonna have people who agree, who disagree, people who are racist, people who are anti-feminist. There's a whole spectrum of an issue that is within, or not just within sport in general, but within society. And it's hard to just generalize people like that. And me, when she says stuff that is very powerful and very, shock journalism, In my mind, it definitely is. It puts me in a bad spot, personally, because I mean, I'm a white male who played, decent high level hockey, and that she's basically saying that I'm a bad person because I did that, and I was part of that hockey culture, and to me that doesn't sit right, because I know who I am, and I know that I was raised decently well, and it does put a bad taste in my mouth, but I do understand where she's coming from, and that there is an issue that needs to be brought up and needs to be it needs to be talked about, and it needs to be rectified. But there's a certain way that you need to say it and you need to come about it. And I don't think that she did justice by saying what she said.
I think that's a fair point, Devin. I think something that she could have done differently is she could have, in the moment, specifically clarified that, this is a statement applying to the people who have shown to be bullies and not so nice and all of that sort of thing, and that it doesn't necessarily apply to all hockey players, and that, if this is not something that applies to you, don't take it personally, because it's not about you. It's about the people who are the problem. I think she could have clarified that in the moment when she was saying that. And I believe she did kind of come out and say that afterwards, when all of the backlash was kind of happening. She did kind of have a follow-up statement.
I wish these experiences didn't happen. And they in no way negate all the positive experiences millions in this country have had with hockey. And my lived experiences certainly don't negate how much good the sport does for communities and families across the country. Rest assured, hockey families, I wasn't speaking about your sons and daughters, who I'm sure aren't bullies and I'm sure love the game as much as you do. I was speaking about my own lived experiences, often negative experiences with those who played the sport, and how they have led to me being conflicted, really conflicted, about how hockey is so closely bound to our national identity.
Where she attempted to clarify that, but I think we're going to be making sort of big sweeping statements like that. We need to be thinking about making sure that we are giving that clarification that no, we're not just talking about everybody as a whole. We're not just painting everyone with the same brush. We're talking about a specific type of person and not everybody. So
okay,
I think she could have done differently.
Okay, so I guess my question is, maybe Devin and Tyler can both answer this. If something like what happened here with Leipsic, if this was found, or anything in this realm that we have talked about here, happened in your dressing room, how would it have been handled?
I think that generally with this kind of stuff, the easy way out for people is to just not say anything. Because what's the upside for you? The upside is okay. Well, I'm doing the right thing. Yes, but then the other side of it is, are your teammates going to find you wimpy? Are your teammates going to find you this or that? Are they going to think you're a snitch or whatever? Like, there's all these sort of like internal kind of like team pressures on people when it comes to speaking out against what their teammates are doing. So the easy way is to just let it be that person's problem and let that person suffer the consequences if they get busted later. So, I don't think there really isn't an easy or right approach there, because whatever you do, you're doomed in a way. Like you're either in the wrong for not speaking out and putting a teammate in line when they're doing something inappropriate or saying something inappropriate, or you're doing the wrong thing by being quiet. It's just it's a difficult situation. I'm not sure how else to really put it.
It kind of goes back to the point that I brought up about like not wanting to rock the boat or bring undue attention onto yourself.
Yeah. Just you do that equation there, and you just think that's not worth it to me to say anything.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I've been an assistant captain or captain of my pretty much every team that I've been on, and I feel like I would want to do the right thing and speak up, but there's so much going on from puberty, wanting to fit in, wanting to be a part of the boys, you don't want to be an outcast, like Tyler was kind of saying, rock the boat. And as Chris was saying, it's a delicate situation, and whether or not you have your backing of other people in the dressing room or not is a big is definitely an issue that whether or not you speak up or not, it's hard, even back in, it's like 10 years, or I guess it was over 10 years ago when I played high level. It was, you always wanted to fit in, you always wanted to be a part of the boys, and it was still kind of like a bit of that old boys club kind of mentality. But I don't know, I feel like I would have stepped up and said something, but it would have taken a lot of courage, that's for sure.
My memory's been jogged now. A few years ago on the rec hockey team I play on, we did have a bit of an incident with one player saying something not nice about another player's wife. But what happened there was simply, like a few people all at once kind of come up and said, whoa, come on now. Like, that's like, too much type of thing. And then everybody kind of shook it off fairly quickly. But there was that, but there wasn't like one guy on the team that had to look like he was the dad of the team, trying to correct the behavior there. There was, there was that right away. There was like a few guys kind of saying like, whoa. And then, as people went home and everything, the people that still lingered around for a bit, they had then had more to say without, being sort of judged or whatever in a way that's going to make them look like they're the dad of the team, I suppose. I don't have a better phrase for that, but, every incident's handled a little bit differently. Some people say, it's not that big a deal, whatever. I don't want to get involved.
Yeah, I've been a part of many ice hockey teams, field hockey teams. Sorry, Hannah, as well as other and I've dealt with many of issues in terms of problems where there was something said and everything, and every instance is handled a little bit differently. Like Devin, I was lucky enough to be chosen to be captain and assistant captain on a few teams, and when time was, as all you guys know, and I think everyone who listens knows, I'm not shy to share my opinion. So I was not shy back then to share my opinion when I had the chance to speak up. So it's also about making sure that it comes down to the coaches too, especially once you go into minor hockey and the junior ranks. It's the coaches and all the authoritative figures in that sense to set the tone. One of my friends, and he was my physical training coach when I was training with the Alberta provincial field hockey team. He told us flat out first training session that we are not allowed to use the R word. And ever since then, I've never. Every time I hear someone use that, I speak up and say that's not right. He set the tone and told us why, and I was in my early 20s, and so that's like 10 years ago when that word was thrown around a lot more than it really should have been. And luckily, I was able to help make the change in at least in that group of people to make it better. So it's not necessarily just on the players. It's on the coaches, the management. Anyone who's in a position of authority needs to set the tone on what behavior is acceptable. And if you do that, and you make sure that anyone who crosses the line understands the consequence and the issue, you're going to be better for it, and you're going to create better people for it.
Mm-hmm. And to wrap things up, the last talking point here, Leipsic had come out with a finger quotes here, apology of sorts. And a lot of people have a lot of opinions about it. Was it acceptable? And I want to go to Heidi on this one.
No.
Mute.
Microphone issue.
Yeah, we can't hear them again.
Sorry. One of us keeps hitting mute, and then the other one unmutes it, and I'm just double checking exactly what he said, but he hasn't already blocked it, but apparently not. Okay, for one thing, I have an issue with this whole thing that he just basically just typed it out and screenshotted it and put it in. For some strange reason, when people do that, I just don't take it as seriously. I saw a kind of a joke going around after this. It's so Brendan Leipsic Googled something like public figure apology on Instagram. And it just had a Google search of every single YouTuber, everybody who's had to make some kind of public apology, and they've all just done it this way, where they just screenshotted a notepad thing. So I would have rather seen something maybe a little bit more probably put together than this. But that's just kind of maybe just the journalist PR person in me. At least he didn't seem to deny anything, which I thought was good. I think that the denial would be the first thing that maybe I would expect to hear is that oh, I didn't do this, but obviously it's right in front of you and you can't really do that. Yeah, I'm happy that you did apologize. I will say that, and I believe that's, that was a good move that he actually did apologize. He didn't just let it just sit and play out, and maybe that people would, forget about it. I think there just needs to be more from him, maybe a video statement, maybe, I don't know, maybe something he had. It's too late now, I guess, to work with the Capitals on something, but, yeah, it's fine, but I would need to see, he refers to, I am committed to learning from this and becoming a better person. So, if he really feels that way, if he's realizing now, maybe as the days have went on and he's seen how much backlash out of this, that he sees this and maybe he's oh shit, I fucked up. Maybe I shouldn't have said this stuff. In the moment it seems fine, but now when it's in screen captures in front of me, I'm wow, I sound like a dick. So it's hard to say without seeing what happens now. For all we know, we're just never going to hear Brendan Leipsic ever again. So we're not going to know whether he actually learned from the situation. But his apology was, I'll just say, it was fine.
It was fine because at least he wasn't trying to double down on the actions and the words, and at least accept that there was some wrong. Because that's true, right? There's different categories of these statements that come out. Sometimes there's the classic, it was taken out of context, or there's the whole, well, I didn't really mean it that way, or we get to this point, it's well, I screwed up and I'm sorry. Now it still doesn't change what happened, but everybody can, Heidi's reaction here is well, that's, you seem to be accepting that to some level.
Mm-hmm. At least for me, when I read it, it kind of came across as very impassioned. He didn't really have any actual feeling behind it. It just felt more I got caught and I have to put this out. So for me, I would have hoped for maybe a little bit more, that next step of, saying, I intend on not only saying I'm going to be better moving forward, but actually, try and prove it through my actions, or, wording something of that effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, real actions, get involved in some causes, that would help bring some positive light to this issue. Like get in, like get behind it, actually do something real. I don't have a suggestion off the top of my head, but it's to say, well, I'm committed to being a better person, and then just sort of walking away from the issue, it doesn't really change much.
Yeah, and I actually saw the apology before I even saw actually what had happened. Like, it was the first thing I saw was an apology, and I was like, what happened? I haven't been on for like 2 hours. Like, what has happened? So, like, the fact that it was just like, it seemed so quick to come out, which I get why. Like, he was probably panicking. He was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know whether he would have consulted either the Capitals. I don't know if they have some kind of player development specialist or somebody that they reach to for that kind of stuff, or whether like a media person or maybe someone from the PA. I don't know how that stuff works, but it seemed like a little bit rushed, but I can kind of understand why it did come that fast, because honestly there's a million things going on in his head.
I have some issues with his apology that he put out. To me, it felt like he was trying to avoid taking responsibility a little bit, in the sense that he was saying, this was a conversation I was part of. It wasn't, these were comments that I made. He needed to own up to the fact that he said some really terrible things about a teammate's wife, about his own teammates, about other players in the NHL. And, his whole thing about being committed to learning from this and being a better person, that's fine and dandy and all, but that's kind of just what's expected of you when you make a mistake and you get in trouble for it. It's just expected that you're going to be better moving forward. And I would have preferred to see him actually apologize for what he had specifically said, and I would like to see him apologize to the people directly that he spoke poorly of.
Yeah, it's interesting to see whether he actually reached out to those people. We don't know. I haven't heard anything.
Yeah.
Whether I think honestly one of the first people he should reach out to is Tanner Pearson and the Pearson family, for sure.
Yeah.
But
I just feel like he could be held so much more accountable for what he did, and he could do a lot more than just putting out what kind of felt like a bit of a generalized PR sort of apology, because it felt like, as Chris was saying, it felt like he was apologizing because he got caught, not because he was actually sorry for what he did.
And I think that's the conclusion for this conversation, because I think that's all the questions that Hannah had, correct?
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything to kind of jump in with?
All I want to say is that, what he did was very shitty, was very uncalled for, and I really hope he is sorry for it. I try to look for the silver lining throughout this, and it's maybe silver lining is not the right word, but you saying something, you as in general people saying something, and then knowing that deep down it's not right, and coming out the other side of it a better person. Maybe there's people out there who are going to say something that didn't say something that was rude or anything. I don't know. What I'm trying to say is that, I try and look on the good side of people and try and make sure that, the bad stuff is recognized. But if he comes out a better person out of this, from this incident, then good people need to stay good people. And yeah, I don't know if I did that justice.
I understand what you're trying to say, even though you may feel like you screwed up on the execution.
For me, it just comes down to we need to stand up and we need to call people out for when they are acting like horrible people. and making comments that are degrading to people. If we can do that, I think we have a better chance at rectifying this situation and this issue better than having just spot rage sessions on social media because of how something has happened from some famous sports person or celebrity.
And can I just say, I love Nicole for her Instagram post that she had made a few days later.
Nicole being Jack's wife.
Yes, sorry. Thank you for clarification. I loved her post that she made a couple of days later. It was a two picture thing on Instagram where the first screen was her with a bunch of the comments that were made about her and stuff like that. And then the next picture was a much happier picture of her and a whole bunch of comments of support that she's gotten from people since this incident had happened. And just the fact that that's how she chose to respond to it and just say, you know what, focus on the bright side and the positives in your life, and don't give that negative stuff the attention that it's wanting.